My husband left me for a younger woman until the hospital called her with news that came from me. I had been standing in the kitchen when he told me he was leaving. The plate of half-cold chicken sat on the table between us. He looked calm. He spoke as if he was reading a sheet of paper. "I need someone who makes me feel young," he said. He put his phone in a pocket and began folding shirts into a small bag. I felt my hands go numb. I watched him pack like a stranger packing for a trip. He kissed my forehead as if he meant it and then walked out the door. I stood there, and the room spun slow. My throat burned with a sound that was not quite a cry. He shut the car door and drove away while I held the plate. I could not move. I thought of the nights I had stayed up with him. I thought of the time I had sold my gold watch to help him with rent. The smell of his cologne left the house hollow. If you want more true revenge stories, hit subscribe for the next. I saw her the next day on my phone. Her face was young and bright on an app one used rarely. She was 25, with glossy hair and a smile that made people click like bees to sugar. She posted a picture of my husband and a watch he wore. In the caption, she called him a king. Comments poured in. "Upgrade," one said. "New leash," another laughed. My heart was a small stone in my chest. I had raised him through school and illness. I had ironed his shirts late and counted coins so he could study. Now his arm was around a stranger who made crowds cheer. I scrolled and felt every old memory burn small and sharp. I thought I would throw my phone, but I kept reading. Shame and anger braided into something hot. I felt watched and foolish. I had fed this life, and the life bit me clean. I wanted to scream, but I sat very still and planned to remember everything. Within a week, the bank called. My husband said the money was for new equipment. He said it quickly and like a man who knew how to make lies sound like business. He emptied our joint account for business expenses and left me with a single text: "Don't make this harder than it is." The words were brittle. I opened the cupboard and found only tea bags and one lonely can of soup. My hand shook as I called my lawyer, but the call went to a voicemail I left angry words on. I thought of the nights I worked 2 jobs so he could study. I remember the times he told me I was the best thing in his life. He had packed all of that into a small suitcase and left it on the porch. I sat on the kitchen floor and let the house echo. The neighbors walked by at noon with their dogs. No one knocked. I learned that cruelty could be quiet like paper sliding off a table. I remembered the early years like a film. I had stood in a tiny apartment with his books and dreams. He had been tired and hopeful. I worked nights and loved him in the small hours I had left. I had sold my jewelry to help pay for his books when med school bills came. I woke early to make coffee before my double shift. I held his hand the night he passed his exam. He had cried then, and I had felt proud. I thought of the nights I sat with him in hospital halls when his mother was ill. I had given him every small thing I owned. We promised to build a life where our moods would be weather, not storms. I painted the nursery and ironed his white coats. I believed in the man who promised us forever. Now the promises were paper in the wind. The memories were heavy like coins in a pocket a child forgets. He filed for divorce without a call. The lawyer's letter arrived on a Thursday like a flat stone. I read the paper with my hands clenched. Emotional incompatibility. It said, crisp and clinical. He had sent a lawyer to speak for him. He had not come to see me. The form listed dates and facts like a report written about someone else. I opened a drawer and found the locket I had pawned to help with rent long ago. I did not cry then. I felt the quiet aim of fury. How could he make this neat? How could he file papers like he was editing a report? I sat at the kitchen table and made plans that included more than crying. I called a friend and then a lawyer I trusted. My life had been built from small truths, and he was trying to erase those truths with printed words. I put the locket in my palm and promised myself it would not be the last thing I held. The photos hit the internet before I even finished my morning tea. There he was, smiling wide, holding the hand of the girl he left me for. She showed off a ring I knew too well. It was the same ring I had bought for him years ago when he said he could not afford one for me. I had used my mother's heirloom to pay for it. seeing her where it felt like a blade pressed to my chest. People online wrote, "He finally found someone better," and "out with the old." I shut my laptop, but the image stayed even with my eyes closed. I walked through the house touching chairs and shelves as if they could steady me. The walls felt too quiet. My breath came short. Betrayal did not just enter my home. It danced in every corner. I knew then that this was no simple heartbreak. Something inside me woke, slow but strong, and whispered that this story would not end the way he thought. The day I signed the divorce papers, rain covered the city like a gray coat. I gripped the steering wheel as I drove home. My chest felt heavy, but I told myself I was done crying. Then a truck turned too fast. Its lights flashed white across my windshield. Metal screamed. The world spun. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on a cold road, tasting blood. People shouted, but their voices sounded far away. At the hospital, they put me in a bed near a window. Machines beeped around me. My husband did not come. No one brought flowers. I stared at the ceiling and wondered how a life could break twice in 1 week. The doctor said I was lucky to be alive. I did not feel lucky. I felt forgotten. I felt like a chapter he had torn out and thrown aside. But even broken, something inside me still reached for the next page. The doctors talked in careful voices. They said my bones needed time. They said I would need months of therapy. I nodded even though the words hit like small stones. One afternoon, I heard 2 nurses whisper. Her husband refused to sign her emergency forms. One said, "He told us she isn't his responsibility anymore." Their words pushed the air out of my lungs. It was one thing for him to leave. It was another to erase me. I stared at the blue blanket on my bed and swallowed the hurt. I remembered the nights I held him when he was scared of failing. Now he acted like he had never known my name. I turned my head toward the window and watched a bird land on the ledge. Even the bird looked like it had more company than I did. I felt a quiet anger settle deep, like a seed in soil waiting for light. A nurse named Ava began checking on me more than the others. She brought extra blankets and warm tea. One morning, she pulled a chair close and said, "You don't have to be alone in this." Her voice broke something inside me, the part that thought no one cared. She helped me read the news when my hands shook too much to hold my phone. That was when I saw pictures of him again. This time he was on a beach with his fiancée. They held drinks and laughed like children on a weekend trip. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Ava placed her hand over mine. "You are stronger than this," she said. I did not feel strong yet, but her words planted hope. My smile was small and weak, but behind it sat something sharper. Rage did not shout. It settled quietly, waiting for its moment to rise. The doctor came in the next morning with a grave face. He showed me scans and pointed to lines I barely understood. "Your injuries are more serious than we thought," he said. "You may not walk properly again." I laughed, but it was not a happy sound. My husband used to joke that I slowed him down. Now the words tasted cruel. I stared at my legs under the blanket, trying to feel grateful they were still there. Instead, I felt a cold fire bloom. If he had seen me now, he would have looked away. I could almost hear his voice saying I was too much work, but I was done letting him define me. Pain could not stop the anger forming inside me, an anger that felt like purpose. I closed my eyes and breathed slow. This was not the end of my story. It was just the start of something sharper. A week after the doctor gave me the news, I got an email that made my fingers shake. The sender's name was hidden. The message said, "You don't know me, but your husband isn't what he seems. Meet me." For a moment, fear took over. I didn't know if it was a trap or a joke, but something inside me wanted answers. I wrote back and agreed to meet in the hospital lobby. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about all the strange things he had done lately. The lies, the missing money, the cold face he now wore. Morning came slow. I asked Ava to help pull me downstairs. She pushed me to a small table near the window. A woman walked in. Her eyes were tired. Her steps were unsure. When she reached me, she whispered, I dated him too. My breath stopped. The world shifted again. This was only the beginning. She sat across from me and held her purse tight like it might run away. Her name was Clara. She said she met my husband last year. He had told her he was single and ready to settle down. He had taken her to dinners I used to dream about. He had bought her gifts I never got. She told me the timelines overlapped. He had dated her while still married to me. There were other women too, girls he charmed for money, image, or fun. She told me he liked women who made him look powerful. My voice felt small as I asked why she came. She said she saw my accident in the news and felt sick knowing I was alone because of him. She placed photos on the table, texts, dates, proof. Each picture was a new cut. I thought I had known my husband. I had known only the mask he wore when it served him. Later that night, I checked his fiancée's social page again. Something felt different. She had posted a black screen with the words, "Trust is a fragile thing." People asked if she was okay. She didn't answer. The next day, she posted a photo of herself looking tired, no smile, with a caption, "Not everything gold shines." Trouble was growing inside their perfect world. I stared at the picture, thinking of her bright face before. Now the shine was gone. She was beginning to feel the same fire that burned in me. I wondered what she had found out. Maybe lies, maybe money missing, maybe a truth he couldn't hide. I didn't feel sorry for her yet, but I didn't feel hate either. She was young. She didn't know the monster she had taken in. Still, knowing cracks had formed in their story gave me a quiet, steady breath. It meant the truth was chasing him. One afternoon, my lawyer visited with a stack of papers. She looked worried. "Justina," she said, "there's something you need to see." She laid out documents showing debts I never knew about, huge loans, late taxes, risky deals. My husband had hidden them under my old name on the clinic license. It meant that if the truth came out, I could be the one blamed. "He used your identity," she said softly. My stomach sank. I felt cold, like ice was spreading through my bones. He had not only left me, he had tried to bury me under his problems. I imagined him smiling on the beach while my name carried his crimes. I stared at the papers until my eyes blurred. This wasn't heartbreak anymore. It was danger. A man who would burn his wife's life to keep his own shining was a man who believed he could never be caught. He was wrong. By then, anger had turned into something sharp. I began gathering everything, records, notes, names, dates. I wrote down each strange call he made before leaving. I saved every message from the bank. Ava helped me set up a small folder on a hospital laptop. She said a hospital administrator she trusted could help us check insurance forms and clinic files. I nodded, amazed that a stranger cared more about me than my husband ever had. Every time I added a new piece of evidence, the picture grew clearer. He was building his future on my name. I felt sick but also focused. I was no longer the woman crying over a cold dinner table. I was a woman preparing for war. When Ava pushed my wheelchair back to my room, she said, "Justice starts with truth." I looked at my hands and whispered, "Then I will gather every truth he tried to hide." I kept gathering evidence like it was medicine. Each file made me feel less helpless. I recorded every phone call he made to me, even the short ones where he spoke like I was a stranger. Ava helped me learn how to save voice clips on the hospital laptop. She also introduced me to a quiet administrator named Henry. He understood what insurance files looked like and helped me check which documents had been signed under my name. We found more lies, fake signatures, wrong dates, bills that were never mine. I felt anger rise like warm smoke inside my chest. I wasn't sure if my legs would let me walk again, but my mind felt stronger every day. I told Ava that I was done being quiet. She smiled and said she believed in me. For the first time since the accident, I believed in myself too. The truth was heavy, but it was mine to carry, and soon it would be his to answer for. He finally showed up at the hospital one afternoon. I saw him through the glass door. He carried roses and wore the smile he used for cameras. Behind him stood a man with a camera, ready to take pictures. "Human interest story," he said, pretending to look shy. He acted like he cared about me, touching my hand gently for the photos. I felt bile rise in my throat. He had ignored me when I lay broken, but now that he wanted attention, he came running. I smiled for the camera, anyway. A plan grew inside me like a vine gripping stone. If he wanted a story, he would get one, just not the one he expected. When the photographer left, my husband leaned close and whispered, "I hope you're not causing trouble." I held my breath and kept my face smooth. He had no idea how much trouble he had already started. 2 mornings later, I saw the news everywhere. His fiancée was pregnant. The photos showed her holding her stomach while he grinned like a prize he won. People congratulated them. I stared at the screen with no blink. Then Henry came in holding a file. He looked upset. "Justina, the bills for her pregnancy were filed under your old insurance." My heart dropped. That meant my identity was still tied to his clinic, and he was using my coverage to help his new life. I felt fire climb up my spine. He had left me in a hospital bed alone, but used my name to take care of someone else. I pressed a hand to my forehead. This wasn't just betrayal, it was theft. It was control. I whispered, "He thinks I'm weak." But I wasn't. Not anymore. Ava held my shoulder and said, "This is the thread that will unravel him." That night in my hospital room, I made my first big move. I wrote an anonymous tip to a news reporter who covered medical fraud. I wrote about fake signatures, hidden deaths, and misuse of patient funds. I kept the tone simple and factual. Then I pressed send. It felt like dropping a stone into a still river and waiting for the ripples to return. Later, I scrolled through his latest photos. He was smiling with his fiancée like nothing could touch him. He thought he was untouchable, but cracks were forming. I watched comments appear under his posts. "Is it true what the papers say?" And "Why are people talking about your clinic?" I closed my eyes as a slow breath left me. This was only the first step. I did not need to shout for revenge. I only needed to open the right doors and let the truth walk in. My therapist visited me the next morning. She was kind, with soft eyes that made me feel seen. After hearing everything, she grew quiet. "Justina," she said gently, "revenge might delay your healing." I looked at my legs covered with blankets. I thought of the accident, the empty hospital room, the lies, the fraud, the women he used. I thought of how he smiled at the camera like he controlled every part of my story. I met her eyes and said, "Revenge is my healing." She didn't argue. She just nodded, understanding that some wounds needed justice before they could close. After she left, I stared at the ceiling and whispered to myself, "I'm not done." The anger no longer scared me. It focused me. I knew that the truth was growing stronger, and soon the world would see the man he really was. Soon after the news tip went out, people began asking questions. Lawyers, reporters, and even old patients started calling his clinic. My ex-husband panicked. He blamed me at once. A long message arrived on my phone. "Stop spreading lies. You're only making yourself look bitter." I smiled at the screen. I had said nothing publicly. The truth was doing the work for me. My lawyer told me that investigators were opening his files. They found things that didn't add up. Numbers missing, names changed, bills shifted. He told them I was behind everything. I stayed silent. Silence was its own knife. He scrambled harder, calling people, trying to control the story. The more he talked, the more holes he dug. I watched from my bed, calm for the first time. The world was beginning to turn. He thought my weakness was my silence. He didn't know silence could be a storm waiting to hit. Ava came into my room one afternoon holding a small recorder. "He's coming again," she whispered. "Let's use this." She hid the device under my blanket near the edge of the bed. When he walked in, he looked nervous, not proud. He closed the door and leaned close. "You need to stop," he hissed. "If you tell anyone what I did with those accounts, I'll make sure you regret it." My heart thumped, but my face stayed calm. He kept talking about the fake papers, the insurance forms, the money transfers he made without my consent. Every word fell into the recorder. He thought he was scaring me into silence. Instead, he was giving me every tool I needed. When he left, Ava lifted the recorder with wide eyes. "This is enough to destroy him," she said. I nodded slowly. His own voice would be the key that locked his future shut. That evening, the younger woman, his fiancée, posted another strange message. Lies always surface. People ask questions again. Then she suddenly deleted all photos of him from her page. My breath caught. Something big had happened. Later that night, she sent me a message. The words were short and shaky. "Can we talk?" Part of me wanted to ignore her, but another part remembered how young she was and how deeply he fooled her too. I agreed to a call. Her voice trembled. She said she had overheard him speaking on the phone about keeping her quiet. She didn't know who her was until she found bills filed under my name. She whispered, "I think he used me. I think he used everyone." I closed my eyes. The truth was finally touching her life too. She was no longer the girl he flaunted. She was waking up from the same lie I once lived. We met in a quiet hospital hallway the next day. She looked smaller in person, like someone who had been carrying fear for many days. She held her stomach gently, protecting the child she carried. "I don't want him near my baby," she said. Her eyes shined with tears she tried not to drop. I told her I understood. She opened her purse and pulled out papers, bank transfers, clinic messages, screenshots, all showing his lies. Together, we laid out every piece on my lap. It felt strange, teaming up with the woman who replaced me. But she was not the enemy.
He was.
"If we work together," I said softly, "we can stop him." She nodded. Her voice was steady when she said, "Tell me what to do." In that moment, the past did not matter. Pain did not matter. We were two women who had survived the same man. Now, we were going to end him. The next morning, I asked Henry from billing for one favor. "Call her," I said. "Tell her there's a problem with the insurance claims tied to her husband." He nodded, understanding more than I explained. Later that day, the fiancé rushed into my hospital room, furious. "They said I'm linked to an insurance fraud case," she cried. "They thought I filed it." Her fear made my chest tighten, but not with pity, with purpose. "Good," I whispered. "Now you know what he is." She sank into the chair and wiped her face. Rage changed her expression. "He used my pregnancy to cover his crimes." I nodded. "And mine before that." She stood up stronger now. "Tell me how we bring him down." That moment felt like a match striking inside a dark room. The war had truly begun. And this time, I wasn't fighting alone. I spent the next week planning something bigger than he could imagine. I told Ava and the fiancé my idea, and both agreed to help. We organized a charity gala under the name of my new rehabilitation foundation. It sounded kind and gentle, which made it perfect. We sent invitations to doctors, reporters, business leaders, people who shaped the city. He loved events like these. He loved cameras even more. I knew he would come thinking he could show off his kind heart. We decorated the hall with soft lights and silver cloth. I practiced my speech in bed, even though I knew the real show would come from him. On the night of the gala, he arrived wearing a bright smile, shaking hands like a king greeting his court. He did not notice the fiancé watching from the corner. He did not know the screen behind him held the truth that would break his world open. When he walked onto the stage, people clapped politely. He started talking about hope and healing, pretending he cared about patients and families. I watched from my seat, my heart beating slow and steady. Then I nodded at Ava. She pressed a button on a small device. The large screen behind him flickered, then lit up bright. At first, he didn't notice. The crowd fell silent. His own voice filled the room. The recording of him admitting to fraud, lies, fake papers, and stolen identities. His face froze mid-sentence. He turned slowly toward the screen, his smile dying in pieces. Gasps spread across the hall. One woman covered her mouth. Another man whispered, "My God." He tried to speak, but words jammed in his throat. The truth he tried to bury stood taller than him now. And everyone saw it. Everyone heard it. He was trapped in his own confession. The room felt electric. Some people stood, Others whispered loudly. That was when his fiancée walked onto the stage. She looked pale but strong, with one hand on her stomach. "I am pregnant with his child," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "And he lied to me too." She lifted a folder. "These are the bills he filed under his wife's name. These are the messages where he called me a tool." The crowd erupted. Reporters rushed forward. Cameras flashed like lightning. My ex-husband reached for her arm, but she stepped back fast. "Don't touch me," she warned. For a moment, he looked small, smaller than I had ever seen him. People who once praised him now pointed at him. His perfect mask cracked until nothing was left. He had no charm to run to, no lies to hide behind. The truth stood on that stage with bright lights shining on every sin. The medical board members were in the crowd. They had come to support the charity, but now they sat stiff, staring at him. One stood up and walked to the stage. His voice was stern. "Doctor, your license is suspended effective immediately pending investigation." The words hit harder than any punch. My ex-husband opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He tried again, louder this time, but no one cared. The board members walked out to call their teams. His phone buzzed again and again in his pocket as the news spread quicker than fire. I watched him step back from the microphone, his hands shaking. The hall that once clapped for him now felt like a courtroom. His clinic closed that same night. Staff left. Patients canceled. The website went dark. Everything he built on lies came down within hours, like a tower kicked at its weak roots. The next days were full of chaos, but not for me. For him. His accounts froze. Investors pulled out. Reporters waited outside his house. He begged people to believe him, but no one listened. The truth was louder. The lie was too big. Meanwhile, my lawyer smiled when she told me we could now reopen the divorce settlement. "Fraud changes everything," she said. "You can reclaim your rights." I nodded slowly. This time, I was not the woman trembling on the kitchen floor. I was someone who had learned how to fight back. I signed new papers with a steady hand. My ex-husband sent me long messages begging me not to do this. I didn't answer. He had once left me with nothing. Now I watched his empire crumble in days. There was no joy in watching a life fall, but there was justice. And justice felt steady and warm. Reopening the divorce case felt like opening a locked door. My lawyer explained every line and showed me how his fraud changed the whole agreement. In court, he looked smaller than I remembered, his shoulders bent, his face pale. He tried to argue that he was under stress and that I was trying to destroy him. But the judge didn't blink. She looked at the evidence, the fake bills, the hidden debts, the stolen insurance, the recordings. She spoke calm and clear. "Mrs. Justina retains marital rights due to fraud." For a moment, he shut his eyes tight, like a child waiting for bad news to stop. When the ruling came, I felt a slow warmth in my chest. I wasn't stealing anything from him. I was taking back what was mine. Half of the remaining assets became mine again. He stared at me, lips trembling. He wasn't angry now, he was afraid. And fear suited him more than arrogance ever did. The younger woman gave birth a month later. She sent me a short message. "Baby is safe. I'm done with him." She packed her things and disappeared from his life, leaving him with bills, rumors, and no one to clean his mess. People online asked where she went, but she stayed silent. He tried calling her, but she blocked him. I heard from the fiancé's cousin that he begged her to come back, but she had already moved to another city and changed her number. He was alone for the first time in years. No wife to support him, no young woman to praise him, no clinic to hide behind. The public stopped seeing him as a doctor. They saw him as a man who fooled everyone. I sat in my hospital bed and breathed slowly. Revenge didn't need fire to burn. Sometimes it only needed distance and truth. Within weeks, the story spread everywhere. Reporters called me asking for interviews. Headlines read, "Wife exposes doctor's secret fraud and the woman who stood against a white coat." My rehabilitation foundation gained new donors every day. People sent letters telling me my bravery helped them stand up for themselves too. I read each message slowly, feeling something change inside me. I wasn't just the woman he left. I wasn't the woman he tried to erase. I was becoming someone new, someone strong enough to turn pain into power. TV shows invited me to speak, but I chose only one. I wore a simple blue dress and shared my story in calm words. I didn't need drama. The truth carried its own weight. When the interview aired, support poured in. My name was no longer tied to his. It stood alone, and I felt taller than I had in months. His life fell apart in real time. Photos showed him outside his big house, now empty and for sale. Reporters waited by the gate while he shouted at them, wild-eyed and angry. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair messy. He looked nothing like the polished man the world once admired. Online comments mocked him. People he once impressed now turned their backs. He tried creating a video defending himself, but no one believed a word. Even his old friends stepped away. Some said they never trusted him. Others said they were embarrassed to know him. His clinic stayed closed. His debts grew. I watched from my small hospital room and felt a calm satisfaction. Not joy, not cruelty, just quiet justice. Pain had chased me for months. Now it chased him. And he had nowhere left to run. The courtroom was packed the day he faced sentencing. I sat in the last row, hands folded in my lap. He stood in front of the judge wearing a suit that didn't fit anymore. His voice shook as he spoke about mistakes and pressure. He said he had learned his lesson. But the judge frowned. She listed every crime: insurance fraud, identity misuse, falsified records, patient harm. Then she said the words he feared most. I sentence you to prison. He collapsed into his chair, face pale as paper. Reporters scribbled notes. Officers stepped forward. I watched quietly, my breath steady. This was the justice he had earned. Not because I hated him, but because the truth demanded it. As they led him away, he looked back once. His eyes searched for pity. I gave him none. Instead, I felt light, as if a heavy door had finally closed. A week after the sentencing, a letter from him arrived at the hospital. The envelope was thin and messy, like it had been handled with shaking hands. I held it for a long moment, wondering what he could possibly say. Ava asked if I wanted her to read it, but I shook my head. I opened it myself. The first line blamed the judge. The second blamed the medical board. The third blamed the fiancé. Not once did he blame himself. Not once did he say sorry. He wrote that I had ruined everything and that I should feel guilty forever. I stared at the words and felt nothing. The letter showed exactly who he had always been, someone who broke things and blamed others for the pieces. I folded the paper, dropped it into a metal tray, and lit it with a match. The fire ate his words fast. I watched the ashes curl and fall. I didn't save a single scrap. Months later, I stood on a large stage at a women's entrepreneurship conference. The room was full, hundreds of women, some older, some young, all watching with hope in their eyes. I wore a long dress and held the microphone steady. I told them my story from the beginning, the betrayal, the accident, the lies, the fraud, and the fight to rebuild. I spoke simply, just like my life had become. When I said, "You are stronger than the people who try to break you," the room erupted in applause. Some women wiped tears. Others stood to clap louder. I felt the sound wash over me like warm sunlight. For the first time, I did not feel broken or forgotten. I felt whole. My foundation received new support that day. Many women came to hug me afterward. "Thank you for speaking," they said. But I wanted to tell them the same thing. Their strength lifted me as much as mine lifted them. One afternoon in early spring, my phone rang again. The number came from a hospital, a different one this time. The voice on the line said my ex-husband had suffered a stress-induced stroke. For a moment, I stared at the wall. Life had strange timing. I asked Ava to take me. I needed closure, not kindness. When we arrived, his room was quiet. Machines beeped slow. He looked thinner, older, his face drained of the pride he once carried. He saw me and tried to speak, but only a weak sound came out. I stepped closer, feeling no fear. I wasn't the woman he left crying in a kitchen. I wasn't the woman lying broken on a road. I stood tall, even if my legs still trembled sometimes. The nurse nodded and stepped out, leaving us alone. He searched my face for pity, for softness, for anything he once controlled. He found none. He tried to lift his hand, but it barely moved. His eyes glistened with tears. I leaned close enough for him to hear my whisper. "Funny," I said softly, "how you left me in a hospital bed, and now you're in mine." His tears slid down his cheeks. He tried again to speak, but his voice failed him. I watched him struggle, not with joy, but with a sense of balance. Life had circled back. The pain he poured into me had returned to him in waves. He wept silently, trapped inside the body he had once filled with pride. I stayed for 1 minute, not more. That was all he deserved. The past no longer held me. His power over me was gone. When I turned toward the door, I felt lighter than I had felt in years. He wanted forgiveness. What he got was truth. Before I left, I told the nurse something he never expected. "Put his care costs under my foundation's charity program," I said. "Let him live on donations from the woman he betrayed." The nurse looked surprised but nodded. I didn't do it for love. I didn't do it for him. I did it because it was the perfect ending, kind on the surface, sharp underneath. Poetic justice. As Ava pushed my wheelchair down the hall, I didn't look back. His chapter in my life was finished. I had survived the marriage, the lies, the crash, the loneliness, and the war that followed. Now I walked, slowly but proudly, into a new life. A life I built myself. A life he could never touch again. Outside, sunlight covered the pavement like a warm blanket. I breathed deep and felt whole. My revenge was complete, and so was I. If you want more true revenge stories like this, hit subscribe and stay with me for the next one.